One of the joys of home ownership is sometimes things fail. That is a shut-off valve that I installed probably 20 or 25 years ago on this faucet, and it looks like it's failing. You can see sort of the shininess down below it on that copper pipe there. Well, we've had a slow leak, and now as I look at it, I can see that that shut-off valve is failing. So on Ask Neighbor Tim, we're going to replace a copper shutoff valve. We're going to shut the main water off at the main water shutoff in the house. Now me, I keep it in a certain room. Yeah, I do make wine a little bit, maybe a little too much it looks like here. But this is my water shutoff. By the way, we'll make wine sometime too. But this is my water shutoff, and it's really fairly simple. All you have to do here with this water shutoff is simply shut it off. Now also, it's really good to know where your shutoff is. So if you don't know where it is, make sure you try to find that. Here's another trick that I always like to use. I got to shut the water off at the main shutoff, but I also have to empty the lines of any water. So I go to one of the sinks that's down in my basement, or if you don't have a basement, go to a sink that's actually at a lower elevation than the sink that you're working on, and open the valves, because you've got to get as much water out of that system as possible so you can make that solder work on those copper pipes. All right, this is where it really gets to be a challenge here. What I've got to do is I've got to cut this pipe here, and I've got to cut it below the valve. This is the valve that I'm going to replace. Now I'm using a smaller, it's a low profile pipe cutter, and you can get this, and this one's a Milwaukee brand. You can see it there. No, they're not paying me to say that. But this is a low profile cutter, and what you simply do is you slip it on the pipe here, tighten it up to where that little cutting blade is against it, and just start rolling it around. And I get a nice clean cut. Now always have some towels around here because you're still going to get some water draining here. But what I want to make sure is that that water is out of this part of it, because this is where my soldering is going to go. Okay, there's one other thing I want to point out. Remember when I said downstairs that we've got to open up one of the valves in one of the sinks that are below this elevation? Well, if we didn't do this, this entire pipe would be full of water, and it would be extremely hard to solder. In fact, it's probably going to be impossible, because what happens is you start boiling the water that's inside of this pipe here, and that boiling water creates steam, and then that steam starts getting into your plumbing. If you get a wet socket or a wet connection, you're not going to get a good solder there. So we've got to make sure this is nice and dry. Now you see I've got it nice and shiny, and what you're wanting to do is make this nice clean surface. You're going to do the same to the inside of your connection, whether it's a coupler or whether it's a reducer like this, but you want it to be nice and shiny. Also, you don't want to touch it with your fingers because you don't want to get oils on it, because you want that solder to be able to adhere as good as possible. Okay, one of the things you're going to want to be really careful is that this is a regular flame and you're inside your house. Usually flames and inside the house don't work really well. But what you're going to do is be very careful. Get that flame right there, and once again, get it on the largest part, the largest part of the connection, and just let it heat up. You're going to start seeing your flux boil just a little bit, and that's going to be the sign where it's time to get the solder in there. And that's what I'm going to do here pretty quick once it heats up a little bit. But you can see it sort of sucks itself up into that crevice there. And it'll actually go all the way around and fill it really good. I'm probably over soldering it just a little bit, by the way. By the way, one of the worst places to work is underneath a kitchen sink, or actually any sink itself. There's absolutely no room, especially for a bigger guy like me. So the next thing you want to do is you want to put some Teflon tape on this threaded part here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten this nut, which goes to my sink. This is my sink connection, my sink hose, and that's going to now be connected here to this threaded piece here. And you want the Teflon tape to wrap around the same way as you are going to thread it. So if I'm going to turn my thread this way, I want the Teflon tape to wrap around that same way. As you can see, when I'm threading this, I have my Teflon tape going this way, and as I'm threading this on, when it turns, it's not going to bunch that Teflon tape up. It's actually going to roll over it and get a good tight seal. So now I've got to make that fasten on there, and then I'll tighten it down. You want to make sure it's nice and tight so you get a good tight seal. That Teflon tape's in there, so that's doing a nice job. Looks like it's nice and tight here. So now we're going to try turning on the water and seeing if we have any leaks. Okay, what I've done is I've gone downstairs, I've turned the water on. Remember, I also had a sink on downstairs in order to drain, so I had to turn that off, make sure that's all ready. I'm looking here, and I always like to just feel around, see if I feel any water, and I'm really not feeling anything. So I think I've got good tight seals at all my solder joints, made sure they were nice and clean, and it looks like I got some really good tight seals. Now let's turn the valve on and see if we get running water. Looks like we got that leak fixed. Not a great shot, I admit, but looks like we got it fixed. Now remember, what we did first is that we identified that the leak was in the valve because we saw a little bit of water streaming down the side of the copper pipe there. So we knew we had to replace that valve. And so what we ended up doing, I used a ball valve this time. I really like ball valves. I think they're a little bit cleaner. I think they're a little bit easier, less mechanical, so less prone to failure. So I used a ball valve and I replaced it sweating pipes, and we talked about how to sweat pipes. We also talked about how we need to shut the water off, know where our water shutoff is in our house, make sure we get that shut off and we drain the pipes before we start the sweating process. We got that done. Everything is sealed up tight. We've got running water now in the sink without any leaks. That's a good thing. Go ahead and give it a try at home. Don't be scared to try something yourself. If you have any questions, of course, put the comments down there in the comment section. But go ahead and give it a try. Thanks for joining me here today on Ask Neighbor Tim.